Welcome, everyone. It is my distinct pleasure on behalf of the College of Arts and Sciences to welcome you here this afternoon. Those of you who are in the audience, as well as those of you who are are participating virtually. We're live streaming the event as well. We're here to honor our esteemed colleague and professor, Dr. Loka Ashwood, and our community members who have been instrumental in having a great impact through the work, and we will learn a lot more about it today. Without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Ed Morris, who's professor and chair of Department of Sociology, to introduce Dr. Ashwood. Thank you.
Thanks, Anna. Well, like Anna said, I'm Ed Morris, and I'm chair of the Department of Sociology, and it's my pleasure to introduce Loka Ashwood to all of you this evening. And so the first thing I want to do is just start off a little bit by giving some perspective on the magnitude of a MacArthur Award. These things are called a Genius Grant for a reason. The people who win these awards are very select. Only a handful of awards are made nationally each year to people in any field who show, quote, extraordinary originality. And since 1981, when the award was first started, just over 1,000 people have won a MacArthur grant. So that's total since 1981. Of that number of 1,000, just 120 awards have been made to social scientists. So just 120 to social scientists. And of that number of social scientists, only 15 awards have been made to sociologists. So Loka is in that company. Don't mean to embarrass you, but it is true. Okay, this is very rare. And some of the sociologists that have won the award, just for my colleagues in sociology, include names you guys have probably heard of, like Robert Merton, Tressie Cottom, Matthew Desmond, and William Julius Wilson. So this is truly elite company. And as many of you know, MacArthur awardees are diverse in their intellectual areas. So these awards range from poets to musicians to astronomers. But most awardees are employed at universities, and this year's cohort is no different. People from this year's cohort are working in institutions such as Princeton, Emory, Brown, Cornell, University of Chicago, NYU, Yale, the University of Pennsylvania, and Vanderbilt. Some of you might have heard of some of these schools. Thinking about them as a whole, I would note that they have something in common, and that's that they are all exclusive private institutions. Loka is in fact the only awardee this year who is employed at a public land-grant university. But this is really a perfect match because community engagement, outreach, and empowering people who have little power is at the heart of Loka scholarship, and you'll see that here today. It is also at the heart of the mission of the University of Kentucky. So this really fits together nicely. And I'll also say another thing that makes Loka unique is how she is synthesizing all of this. MacArthur Awards create kind of a frenzy of media attention and interest, and as I said, they're very exclusive and prestigious. So an award of this caliber can, tend to give some folks a pretty big head. And I can say that they've even given me a big head, and I didn't even win anything. I'll take it. But Loka is actually somewhat uncomfortable with all this attention and would prefer to remain humble and really just get on with the job. In fact, when news of the award broke and we were getting all the media attention, she seemed most concerned about what she was going to do to teach her class. And this is a true story. I have to tell you guys about this. She actually texted me to ask if it was okay if she could cancel class to attend a reception at the White House. I thought about this for a little bit, and then I wrote back and told her I would consider that an excused absence. That's because I'm nice. That's a nice thing I do as chair. Anyways, so today you will all get to see not only how groundbreaking Loka's research is on an intellectual level, but also how it makes a real impact on people's lives and on communities. So please join me in welcoming our MacArthur winner, Loka Ashwood.
Thank you so much, everyone, for gathering here today. It's truly unbelievable. I mean, I'm still stunned that they selected me for this. I found out in Patterson Office Tower on the 15th floor after missing a few calls after coming into campus and didn't know who it was, somebody calling from Chicago, and I finally answered, and they asked me to close the door, and I did, and found out the good news. So it's truly beautiful. I found out on campus as well. You know, as we're starting to get started, is it possible to pull up the PowerPoint and get that active if you have it ready? Oh, okay. All right. So I can go ahead and just click on. Okay, brilliant. Okay, so just a few folks. I already thanked some folks earlier at the president's reception, which I'm so thankful for. But I just wanted to thank them again. There's a guy with some big arms and two little guys with some little arms that I'm so thankful for, that just lift me up all the time and keep me laughing. Just thank you so much. And I'm very thankful for my friends who have come from around the country to be here today. Some of them, Meg Collins took photos for Profit Democracy. Sarah Lessam visited me when I was in Burke County. They're always there for me, these beautiful friends. I can't thank you enough for joining me today. And then students and professors that I work with. Where are all of you? So there you are. There's the beautiful sociology graduate student cohort. I want to especially thank two folks I'm working with right now. Mohammed Khalilian. Mohammed, where are you? There he is. And Andy Pilney, because their work is really germinal to what I'm talking about today, which is tracking down who's benefiting from stripping economic power out of rural communities. And that work that is ongoing right now is really driven by some of the experts at the University of Kentucky that I've had the pleasure to work with. I also could thank a lot of mentors in this room, rural sociologists, some of them are in here, that this wouldn't happen without. The rural sociological community is foundational to everything I do, and for putting up with me when I'm a little crazy and trying to, for over 15 years, trying to keep me calm, but I think I'm still getting crazier. But a lot of folks in this room are part of a movement. And I want to say that together, the movement towards rural justice, we're continuing to go forward, but I also think that we can come back. And I consider coming back to be at the heart of economic and environmental justice in rural communities. So on a steamy July day, 8 years ago, my dad was coming back. He was coming back to what we call the hog farm. It's where he and my mother got their real start. They got their financial footing, and it was a year after they bought the farm, a year after I was born, during the farm crisis. Another farmer had gone bankrupt during what we now know to be one of the most severe agricultural crises of all times. Debt crippled farmers as land prices collapsed. The US grain embargo against the Soviet Union, it bottomed out commodity prices. Farmer suicides hit record highs. Just a year before I was born, and I'm 39, I'll admit it, a banker that was flanked with heavily armed bodyguards had come to my parents' doorstep, and they were there to get payment or to repossess the farm. They left after they realized they had confused my father with another farmer. But what never left my community, where I grew up, was the constant fear that you could be dispossessed, that you were on the edge. Yet that steamy July day, some 30 years later, Dad was still coming back to that beautiful farm. He stepped up onto his John Deere 950, and over his shoulder were the leftovers from one of those 100-year torrential rains we seem to be getting more and more of all the time. So corn cobs and stalks, they were strewn all over the road, and gravel was strewn all over the fields. And it was one of the heaviest rainfalls my dad, my mother, or my grandparents could remember. So Dad drove the tractor that day toward a thin isthmus that was between pond pasture, timber, and holler, and it was just wide enough for the tractor to cross. And that's when the worn tread on the tire, it lost its traction, and the tractor slipped. And the pressure started an avalanche of saturated dirt that slid down the dry dam. So Dad wasn't wearing a seatbelt that day. He went into the air. As the earth collapsed and the tractor, it started to overturn. His battered straw hat that my mother found later flew off his head, and it settled onto the cattle's muddy footpath. Dad landed in a bed of thorns, deep in the hidden shade between the hills and the pond, and the tractor was on top of him. In that moment, his shoulder and his leg bones, they shattered. They splintered and they fragmented, and the air left him as the pressure brought 8 snaps in the emptying of his right lung. But he regained consciousness, and his left hand was still free. He's left-handed. He nudged the phone out of his pocket, and he flipped it, and he called 911, and a friendly operator known to him, Teresa, she answered and she asked, "Steve, where are you?" And he was just able to whisper out the address. It was numbers, but not Grove. You don't see any numbers in this picture. He was alone. He was so terribly alone. Because even though my dad had come back to the hog farm that day, so many others hadn't. Along the roads that took him there, farmhouses were and are abandoned. Others are gone, burned to the ground, with only the memories that those who remain can still tell. So as Dad was there, his oxygen continued to drop as he lay under the crushing weight of iron. Volunteer fire crews arrived from nearby towns. They came to find him. They shouted out, "Steve," friends who knew him, but not the land. They struggled to find him between this beautiful cradle of hills that held him. He didn't have enough oxygen to speak, to cry out. In the frantic search, someone caught sight of my dad's dog locked on the front porch, and they let her out. She bolted across the pasture and down into the ravine, and the rescue crews followed. So they all saved my dad. They saved my dad that terrible day, as did the care of the doctors, the nurses, and my mother that followed. And his temperament and his stubbornness, it didn't hurt either. And I'm so happy that he and my mother have joined us here today. And I'm even happier to report that nearly every day, my dad keeps coming back to the hog farm. So many other farmers aren't coming back. We've witnessed in the last 46 years an absolute decimation of U.S. farmers. It's happened across administrations, Democrat or Republican, and it's happened with a few hopeful trends, and you can see one there at the top. And I don't want to make light of the fruit, nut, and berry farms. I love fruit, nuts, and berries. It's wonderful to see them thriving. But most types of farms have dropped precipitously. It's the worst for hog and dairy farms, We've lost a staggering 88%. 88% of our hog farms in those 46 years, and we've lost 89%. 89% of our dairy farms. But it's not just a 46-year trend. It's been acute in the last 5 years. Between our last two censuses of agriculture, we've lost 39% of our dairy farms in the United States. Just in 5 years. That's less time than my youngest son, Rowan, has been alive. It's been a bloodbath in states like Wisconsin and New York. We've lost 15% of our cattle farmers in 5 years. And that's cattle farmers that make up most of the farms that we have here in Kentucky. We've lost 13% of black farmers. And there are so few left to lose. Only 28,723 black farms remain in the United States. Yet we keep losing them. Why is this happening? Why can't these farmers come back? So depending on where you're sitting, whether it's on the front steps of the farmhouse or like me, if you're looking now and you're watching the data, it's been both slow and likewise acute economic injustice. And what I mean by economic injustice is a gradual but methodical taking of economic power from the people and concentrating it in the hands of the few. Our government's policies have played a key role in taking away farmers' economic power. Sonny Perdue, the Secretary of Agriculture during President Trump's first administration, he stood before Wisconsin farmers at the Dairy Expo in 2019, and he said to them, in America, the big get bigger and the small go out. The funny thing about being small is it's actually a very, very big thing. It takes a lot of heart to be small. It takes a lot of heart to feed people in your community, to make decisions every day that you know will have an impact on the future of children and the fabric of your community. Isn't that the essence of democracy? To act with a mind for the benefit of others who form a community. So when the United States Secretary of Agriculture told dairy farmers it was their time to go, they took it to heart. Torn between the responsibility of community and the idea that they were un-American for being small, the farmers felt it was their fault. Wisconsin farmers die by suicide at a rate 2.5 times the national average. That awful word average, as though there can be an average for such things. It's likewise an awful thing to feel torn between the ethos of what it means to be an American and what it means to serve your community. So how do you make farmers get big or get out? Or we could rephrase this. How do you take economic power from the many and concentrate it in the hands of the few? In other words, you promote policies that deflate the power of people and their places. It's emblematic to look at Iowa to understand what happened. Iowa is the home state of the most recent Secretary of Agriculture, U.S. Secretary of Agriculture, Tom Vilsack, who served 12 years, over a decade in total as Secretary of Agriculture, 4 years under President Biden, and 8 years under President Obama. He just left the office. But Vilsack, he came to Washington by way of Iowa, where he was governor for 10 years and before a state senator. During his time there, Vilsack led the charge for consolidation in hog production. Under Vilsack's watch, Iowa lost roughly half of its hog farmers. That's from 1997 to 2007, roughly half. This bears repeating, just gone in 1 decade. Yet over that same time period that Iowa lost half its hog farmers, production of hogs increased by 40%. Today, there are over 67 million hogs, or pigs, sold in Iowa, roughly 21 hogs relative to every person. Stripping so many farmers of their economic power required leaving behind their embeddedness in place. It required making it possible to commit get big or get out environmental injustices that were formerly unfeasible or unthinkable. For farmers before the collapse, it was unfeasible to have thousands of hogs packed in as tight as consolidation demanded because they didn't care for them because farmers couldn't care for them properly. And what they thought of by properly was a bit of time outside, you know, especially for pregnant sows, not leaving them in a gestation crate that constrained them to the point that they couldn't turn around or walk. The former U.S. Secretary of Agriculture, Vilsack's sweeping advocacy would deliver an export model with hog gestation confinement so large that they could produce more manure in 1 year at one of these facilities than all the people who lived in a county that housed that one facility. The hogs now are packed so tight and the fumes are so caustic that they need a constant supply of non-therapeutic antimicrobial growth promotants to stay alive and grow faster. These researchers have found that these antibiotics have contributed to the growth of antibiotic-resistant superbugs because people also consume these antibiotics when they eat meat. Rural bankers, farmers, equipment dealers, and people seeking to live in the countryside, they saw these confined feeding operations as an existential threat to their way of life. To break their will of resistance, the law had to change. Vilsack supported and passed legislation removing the abilities of counties in Iowa to say no. Longtime farmers and neighbors reacted. Their more direct path to action through local county governance was gone, so they reverted to the constitutional protection of their property rights. So they tried to sue, saying, this is a nuisance and trespass. It's a violation of my property rights. But multinational corporate actors in Iowa and around the country use so-called right-to-farm laws to fundamentally challenge the constitutional meaning of private property in the United States. They did so, and they are doing so by stripping away certain elements of property rights, like the right to peace and enjoyment, saying that the aims of corporate agribusinesses feed the nation despite choking their neighbors. We found that over a 50-year period, right-to-farm litigation has become more pronounced in the United States. And when they go to court, you can see who wins the most. Concentrated animal feeding operations and business firms. But who's the least likely to win? It's farmers who operate by their own name are least likely to win in right-to-farm litigation. It seems they don't have as much of a right to farm. Rural kids that are going to school proximate to these concentrated animal feeding operations, they have higher rates of asthma. Iowa's wells are overloaded with nitrates, a nutrient found in manure, and researchers have found that nitrates are associated with higher rates of colon, bladder, and ovarian cancer, amongst others. Iowa now has the second highest overall cancer rate in the nation, and twice as many cancer cases as it did in 1973. It's tragic, but the farmers went first. The skeletons of their farms, a harbinger of what was yet to come. That economic pain, that dispossession hit hard and fast before we realized the slow violence of the environmental harms yet to come. The bottom dropped out of the hog markets in 1998, just 3 years after the U.S. joined the World Trade Organization. To meet WTO's requirements, U.S. farm policy channeled to serve global supply and demand. And with it, it channeled more money towards fewer players. My best friend in high school, her stepdad's hog operation, it collapsed after prices hit their lowest level in 34 years. His mind strayed, feeding on the trauma he carried with him from serving in the Vietnam War. He retrofitted his hog confinement into horse stalls, and I would help my friends some days clean the stalls and brush the horses. She taught me how to ride, and I came to know her as a skilled rider, even though she had a frame even slighter than mine. She showed grit and heart as she guided me through the art of sorting cattle on horseback. Her mom sold me my first horse and my first saddle. Today, they are all gone from that place. Our leaders, they struggle to find words to articulate why rural communities matter, even why farmers matter. Vilsack, in his most recent time as secretary, he tried to step back as the big as better approach that he had advocated for before under President Obama. He argued that the United States Department of Agriculture should get funding to small and mid-sized farmers because rural areas, to quote his words, support a significant percentage of the military. And you need, again to quote his words, enough people to service the military. There, the United States Department of Agriculture found justification for rural people centered around another export model, this time, people. Simultaneously, former Secretary Vilsack has cautioned that he doesn't want to demonize any operations, especially the big business firms. He continued to openly embrace making Iowa, in his words, the food capital of the world. Most importantly, there's an unwillingness to recognize that the biggest corporations, they have prevailed through dispossession, whether through property rights or the practice of farming itself. In part, it's because we don't keep track of who ultimately makes money from this extractive model and who our government is actually giving subsidies to. My colleagues and I, including Andy Pilney here at the University of Kentucky, we have worked to pin down the flow of money that's enabling the dispossessions of farmers and rural people. We found that the Farm Credit System, which is a US government-sponsored enterprise, has loaned money to the biggest companies that have played a role in driving hog farmers off the land. In fact, they've given more loans than any other funder, including private banks. A top recipient is Smithfield Foods, a subsidiary of WH Group, which is a food conglomerate held and mostly managed by investors in China. Farm Credit's stated purpose is to provide, to quote again, safe, sound, and dependable sources of credit and related services for all creditworthy and eligible persons in agriculture in rural America. This irony is not lost on rural people living ground zero next to these facilities. These massive multinational conglomerates thrive on using corporate structures to dodge culpability. They use limited liability companies at the local level to mask their identities and at the federal level to get subsidies to each subsidiary, which can appear as an independent farm, but is actually part of a multinational structure. The same structure increasingly typifies farmland investment and likewise masks the ultimate beneficiaries in US farmland acquisitions. It's made us ill-equipped to understand just how much land in the United States is absentee-owned. Yet, the United States Department of Agriculture, to its peril, because of its supposedly neutral position on farm size, has an agricultural foreign investment disclosure database that doesn't get at who or what is behind the business firm red tape. And our approach to breaking up firms through antitrust litigation, it hasn't caught up to just how intertwined ownership now is. And the US Department of Justice keeps allowing more and more companies to merge. In 2022, the US Department of Justice allowed the massive grain conglomerate Cargill to buy yet another firm, this time another poultry producer, Sanderson Farms. Cargill has been the nation's largest private business firm for 37 years. 37 years. It's been the United States' largest private business firm, meaning for all those years, it's generated more revenue than any other company. Cargill and its subsidiaries, the US Department of Justice did say, well, you're going to pay an $85 million fine if you want to merge. But this company made $160 billion just last year. $160 billion, $85 million fine. Meanwhile, because these behemoth companies have so many LLCs and subsidiaries or business associates, the government struggles to keep up with who owns what. Our Government Accountability Office has warned that it's unclear who the ultimate owners are behind corporate entities that have received millions, perhaps billions, in government aid. You can't feed the beast and defeat it too. And our leaders continue to think they can feed corporate entities buckets of grain and that giving a few kernels to place-based farmers will satisfy the rural appetite for fairness. Communities, despite the odds, they have pierced through corporate veils, in some cases using local know-how to do so, and we'll hear more from one such group, Nope, later. In the meantime, though, animosity toward the government grows, and especially politicians that pretend it's not a problem. The skeletons where I grew up perhaps pale in comparison to other casualties in this cruel system. The behemoth Brazilian company, JBS, for example, it contracts with cattle companies that are clear-cutting Amazonian rainforest. JBS just last year bought up Trioaks, and with it, some of the last remaining hog confinements or production contracts where I grew up. JBS now puts more demands on the operators and the hogs, wanting them even bigger, even heavier to speed up processing. The hogs are so heavy that a few of them die on the semi-trips to the processing plants that JBS also owns. Children work at these plants, often immigrant ones. Just last month, the U.S. Department of Labor held JBS culpable for employing children in dangerous jobs and overnight shifts. One 13-year-old suffered caustic chemical burns while cleaning equipment overnight, where animals are slaughtered. Less care all around for hogs, people, or forests. JBS is now the most powerful processor in beef, hog, and poultry production in the world. The incestuous power of agribusiness derives likewise from chemical and plastics production. Corteva, just down here, Corteva is a chemical and seed company that also owns Dow and DuPont, which are major plastics and chemical producers. They have a vested interest in ensuring that your food comes from further away, wrapped in plastic, and it distances the farmer from your plate. The squeeze of farmers that you saw in that first slide, 88, 89% gone, that squeeze bleeds into the grocery store. Oligopoly and monopoly powers are becoming ever more pronounced. This get big or get out version of agriculture and all its casualties, is this what it means to be American for U.S. Secretaries of Agriculture? Right now, the harms are so great and the cries out for help of such magnitude that our regulatory apparatus, it can't keep up, especially in rural places. How can it? There's so much space and there's so many companies. Often people talk about environmental injustices as disproportionate harms, ones that can be equalized by spreading them out more, or imposing reviews that make sure rural places with more Black people or more Indigenous people don't have to bear so much of a burden. It's inherently retroactive. By thinking we can regulate ourselves out of environmental injustices and not remembering their beginnings in dispossession, we have left so many people with so little recourse. You're going to hear from residents of Burke County and Richmond County about a corporate-state partnership in taking land where the Vogtle nuclear reactors lie in Georgia. This is, again, a Fortune 500 company alongside the state of Georgia, the public body, governance body, the state of Georgia, forcibly acquiring land from rural people by claiming the power of eminent domain to act in the public good. The acquisition of land for the first 2 nuclear reactors in the 1970s was predominantly taken from rural Black people. The latest expansion of the plant, just recently completed, which added on Vogtle Units 3 and 4, it mostly took land from rural white people. What is shared in these ripples of dispossession across these differences? To have an environmental injustice, you must strip people of their economic power. And for companies to keep compiling more economic power, they must keep stripping away what other people have. I think we can shake off the yoke of big as best. And I think we can take on this big beast. But it calls for getting at the way in which corporate power works in the United States, going back to our country's roots as a colony and the long contested path toward making it more democratic. We still have an incorporation tradition brought to us by British nobility, and companies whose explicit purpose was to colonize, displace, and dispossess. These companies played an early role in seeding animosity toward the British crown and eventually compelling the American Revolution. Yet that revolution, while removing the formal yoke of noble rule, it never quite came to terms with the unbridled power of the dispossessive corporation. Its sole purpose, as historian Ned Blackhawk writes, was to pursue, in quotes, profits by any means. Those means included killing indigenous people and seizing Algonquian lands over 400 years ago. Those means included enslaving indigenous and Black people. So much has changed, yet so much hasn't. You can look at land ownership and coal companies in eastern Kentucky to see that colonial control has never quite gone away. These foundations of our past, they remind us of our choices, but also our contradictions. Yes, we are all wrapped up in these contradictions. Many farmers who have stayed, like my own family, did so by getting bigger, at least for a while, and buying up when others went out, at least for a while, and by using the tools that availed, at least for a while. There's no hogs on the hog farm anymore. It takes some soul searching to try to stop this dispossession. I take inspiration from farmer Matt Howey in Fulton County, Illinois, who stood up and resigned from his local Farm Bureau chapter after they supported an investment firm's concentrated animal feeding operation. In his letter of resignation, he said, "I simply cannot continue to offer my time and resources to an organization which supports the installation of these CAFOs without regard to the effect on residences and family farms to which so many people have devoted their time and attention, some for generations." I take inspiration from Christy Hiett, who you will hear from shortly. She loves children. She has used that love, her deep empathy and determination, to fight for justice and take on childhood cancer. She did this even when the public agencies that she turned to for help continued to tell her there was not a problem in her community. I think that the panelists that you will hear from today, they do this because they love, but they also see. They see people in places and they won't give up on them. They are drinking glasses of water with them. They share in their anguish when they see their children sick. Is it not these kinds of intents and purposes that should be enshrined and encouraged in a democracy? We can begin with community intent rather than ending with community burden. We might call this new vision moving forward the community corporation. Why not? The corporation is indeed a creature of the state. That means we can do whatever we want with the corporation. Let those other creatures of the state that it is beholden to, the people, have power, have control over the corporation. Instead of a crown chartering corporations or the wealthy billionaires today that are exploiting the legal system to their gain, Can we not return the public purse to people through localizing the corporate farm? We have hints as to how the community corporation could come to be. Right now, the proposed Farmland for Farmers Act seeks to bar multi-layered subsidiaries from buying up land, but not only from receiving subsidies from the U.S. government. The Corporate Transparency Act, it gives law enforcement the ability to require all business firms in the United States to register their ultimate beneficiaries. But big businesses right now posing as small businesses are challenging it. These critics claim that it's a burden to tell you that they own something. We should ask ourselves why. States like Hawaii are working to clarify that it is home and community, not profit, that are the most important elements of our property rights that give farmers a leg up. Agrarian trusts and community land trusts, likewise, are tools that show us a path to a different tomorrow. People are growing food now, whenever they can, however they can, so they know that their neighbors can eat good food no matter where it comes from. Just throwing money at the problem won't work, but throwing away the organizational model will. The business firms that now dominate our society increasingly make it difficult to do the best work that lets all our physical and mental ingenuity revel in the richness of place. We can have legal forms that do not threaten the basis of our lives. Even more, we can have ones that provide new possibilities where you can choose to stay or leave. Culture can be a part of production, and good food can be a basis of a good life. These are the centerpieces of our economy and our future. How about we let communities incorporate corporations? Let's help communities not just come back, but let their ingenuity take us forward and their empathy lead us to a new tomorrow. The future is indeed theirs. Thank you. I think, should I go? Oh, you want to take the floor, Ed?
Sure.
Yeah.
And you're going to set the panel up?
Yeah.
Okay. Hi, everyone. While we're getting the panel ready, Loka asked that I read a letter that was written by one of the community organizations that she's worked with. One of the most exciting things about Loka's work is that she doesn't just point out problems, but she also works with communities to develop solutions to those problems. So this letter of congratulations and support was written by the NOPE organization, who was referenced in Loka's talk, and that stands for Neighbors Opposing a Polluted Environment. So the letter says, "We are thrilled to congratulate Loka Ashwood on receiving a prestigious university fellowship at the University of Kentucky for her unwavering commitment to safeguarding the health and wellness of rural Americans. Loka's tireless efforts, alongside other dedicated health advocates, have set a shining example of community-driven activism and the power of collective action. Loka and her fellow advocates played an instrumental role in supporting Neighbors Opposing a Polluted Environment, NOPE, a grassroots organization that recently celebrated a couple of major victories. Together, they successfully opposed the permitting and construction of two massive rural concentrated animal feeding operations, CAFOs, that would have housed over 20,000 animals, including 8,000 piglets. This achievement is a testament to the meticulous research, strategic legal counsel, and heartfelt dedication to protecting rural communities. NOPE's efforts, bolstered by the support of Loka and her friends, culminated in the withdrawal of the sitting applications for both CAFOs. The group's success was rooted in the research and strategic use of 8 denial criteria justifications encapsulated by the acronym HOGWASH, a framework that emphasized critical concerns about water, W, air, A, soil, S, and health, H. Here's a closer look at the evidence Nope presented to halt these operations. Water, runoff, and leachates from confinement operations posed a significant threat to nearby streams and underground water supplies. The proposed sites sat atop a vital aquifer with multiple potable wells within a protected 1,760-foot setback. Air, toxic particulates and unbearable odors emitted by factory farms would have negatively impacted property owners within the setback as well as the broader community. Soil, contamination from faulty livestock operations was a documented risk, with evidence from 7 resolved state lawsuits supporting Nope's claims. Health, both proposed sites were dangerously close to public spaces, including a community center, a public park, and a Boy Scout camp and trail. These locations fell within a 3,520-foot protective setback meant to safeguard areas used by 50 or more people for common assembly. The culmination of this hard work led to the withdrawal of both CAFO's siting applications, ensuring the protection of local water sources, air quality, soil integrity, and community health. Loka Ashwood's fellowship recognizes not only her dedication to this critical cause, but also her broader commitment to rural health advocacy. Her leadership in empowering communities, leveraging research, and collaborating with local experts underscores the importance of standing up for what is right in the face of powerful opposition. We extend a heartfelt thank you to Loka and her fellow health advocates for their remarkable contributions to Nope's success. Their efforts have made a lasting impact on the lives of rural residents, setting a powerful example for others to follow. As we celebrate Loka's well-deserved recognition, we are reminded that protecting our rural communities is a shared responsibility and that collective action can drive meaningful change. Congratulations once again, Loka. That's awesome.
Okay, so now we're going to get to hear from who I like to call the real heroes that are joining us here today. If the three of you want to go ahead and come up and take seats, I think that would be great. So we're going to have a panel with some short talks. I'll first start off with introducing them. I've had the deep pleasure of working with these folks over the last 15 years. Christy, a little less time, but I think I first met Claude 15 years ago. And these are people who serve rural communities, and they're from rural communities, and they continue to take on the most important issues in rural areas: education, clean water, faith, access to housing, persistent poverty, and cancer. So I want to start first off, I'll just do, I think, brief introductions of each of you, and then whoever wants to go first can take the floor. But Christy Hiett, she's the principal of the Fruithurst Elementary School in Fruithurst, Alabama, a school that is also a National Blue Ribbon School. She has lived in Fruithurst her entire life, and she attended Fruithurst Elementary School as a child. She started teaching at Fruithurst Elementary School in 1996 after graduating from Auburn University and became the principal there in 2007. She has her doctorate in school improvement and is a national board certified teacher. She has 29 years of teaching experience, and she is a founding member of Cleburne Cancer Concerns. Claude Howard in the middle, he is a Vietnam veteran and a resident of Burke County, Georgia. He is a member of Shell Bluff Concerned Citizens and the Blue Ridge Environmental Defense League. He's an active teacher and a minister at Allen Chapel Baptist Church. And last is Reverend Charles Utley. He is a member of the Blue Ridge Environmental Defense League and a minister at the McMurray Spring Branch Church in Shell Bluff, Georgia. Blue Ridge Environmental Defense League is working to repair homes for senior citizens in the area so that they can stay where they've always been. They're raising funds to retrofit for the elderly. And they are also working on scholarships to give students the help they need to go to colleges anywhere in the country. And if you, as these folks are talking, if you want to learn more or want to contribute to their efforts, you can just draw on one of the Scantrons and learn more about what they're doing. But each of them are going to take 5 minutes and talk to you about their work and what's happening in their communities, their work towards rural justice. And then we'll just have an open question and answers with the audience that I'll moderate. Are you stuck going first?
Okay, thank you for inviting me to honor Loka. It's a privilege to be here. She and I have worked together for a while, but I am Christy Hiett, as Dr. Ashwood said. I'm the principal of Fruithurst Elementary School. FES is located in Fruithurst, Alabama, which is a very small rural community. Just for size reference, I currently have 220 students at my elementary school, so very small. When Fruithurst children were being diagnosed with leukemia in 2016, people in the community looked to me for answers. I became consumed with the cancer issue because it was impacting children. I had children in my school diagnosed with leukemia. I desperately tried to find answers on my own prior to meeting Dr. Ashwood in November of 2016, but I was unsuccessful with multiple attempts with various agencies. I really say I got nowhere very quickly. Nowhere. The research in Fruithurst was started when 4 young males in the Fruithurst community were diagnosed with cancer within months of each other. That count of 4 males quickly doubled when 4 middle-aged females were diagnosed with leukemia and lymphoma, both of which are blood cancers. Within months, that number grew to 10 individuals diagnosed with leukemia or lymphoma, and is currently at 13 cases since 2016. Of those 13 cases, 5 are deceased, and 2 of those were my students. And both of their names were on the signs that Loka showed. In addition to these 13 cases, 1 male child was diagnosed with osteosarcoma in 2016, and then another male child was diagnosed with osteosarcoma in 2023. Both of which is a very rare cancer. Research was conducted in Fruithurst between 2017 and 2021. Through the survey research, it was discovered that there were 41 cases of leukemia or lymphoma that had been diagnosed in a small rural town like Fruithurst since 1987. The survey data also determined that there are a total of 16 types of cancer found to be higher when compared to national estimates, with some types being up to 13 times higher than the national average. We sampled and tested numerous water and soil samples from the Fruithurst community. Our research determined that the Fruithurst groundwater aquifer was contaminated with heavy metals and chemicals. The people of the Fruithurst community were consuming contaminated water that had been contaminated since 1996. All residents of the Fruithurst community do not have access to municipal water. Those people rely on a well for their water supply. Therefore, they have no option but to consume the contaminated water. In an effort to help people that couldn't connect to municipal water, we received grants for reverse osmosis filtration systems. A total of 75 filtration systems were dispersed for the people to have access to clean drinking water. We also received state grants to install municipal water lines in areas that did not have them. Being in a rural area, there are times when just one community road would cost $250,000 just to run a main water line. That's a really big deal. So it takes a lot of money, and there are still people who do not have municipal water connections at all. They don't have a choice. So they rely on those reverse osmosis systems to have clean drinking water for their family. I could not have accomplished anything related to the cancer research in Fruithurst had it not been for the researchers with whom I collaborated, especially Dr. Ashwood. I am forever grateful for the help I received with the cancer research and for the help we were able to provide for the people of my community. Thank you. he going to use his mic?
Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon. We're thankful for being here this afternoon because with Dr. Loka came through our area during the time when we was going through a lot of troubles and things that happened in our area. During that time, we had a lot of small farmers in the area, and as the large plant moved in, it began to take advantage of the farmers down in the area. And as it took advantage of them, and what it was doing was moving them out of their position. And so as a large company come in, then it was all about the bottom line, the profit. And so when we look at life today, and we see how things are changing today, life hasn't changed for us making us better, but life has changed as making those at the top better. And that's not according to what our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, when you want those humble ones to be taken care of. And I thank Dr. Loka for that, for being humble, coming in the area, letting us know what was going on and how to deal with the situation that we was in. Because a lot of the local farmers were being taken out of the picture. And at that time, when they came in, they plant pines all over the land that was the local farmers were. And the whole area was a lot of farmers in the area, black farmers. And there was no justice. And today there's no justice either. Because when you come down to the point, we'll look at the color of skin, but it's not the color of skin that's killing us today. It's the spirit that's within each one of us individually and collectively. And that's what we're falling apart at. And we as a body, we need to stick together and stand on one accord to be able to do the things that are according to the one that has all power in his hand to fulfill the task that was set before us. And we all should be a good stewards of what he has blessed us with. And when we take those things that he has blessed us with and misuse them for our personal gain, then we're not doing what we're called to be. And so, as I said, I thank Dr. Loka for coming in our area, opening up our eyes to be able to see injustice in the rural community. Thank you.
My friends, we have been blessed. We've been blessed because we had somebody to come and see the problems that we were having, that we weren't even aware of, that we were having. It's when they were building Plant Vogo and they were building all the things around the area, it was being used. People even were catching rides from Augusta, Georgia, going down to Waynesboro because they were being hired there to work. But they didn't know the rest of the story. That it was being done, but it was being taken from the residents, like Reverend Claude was saying. Property that was being taken unjustly, being done by those who didn't care. But we were able to understand it once you came to town. And that was a blessing. When you have somebody to help you be able to understand what's going on in your neighborhood. And with that being a part of what my life was created by my mother and my father. Because they created a community came out of Burke County and Waynesboro. They were able to move to a place called Hyde Park, which was in Augusta, Georgia. But yet we still was working in Waynesboro and still working there because my church is still in Waynesboro. And also pastor in the same area in Waynesboro. Because you don't lose where you come from when you're trying to keep working, building a relationship to stop the injustice that's coming upon you. And that's one of the things that even working with Reverend Howard there and with even being able to be invited to where I am today. We want to make sure the world knows the problems that we're dealing with. When you have a company that's been recognized to build a factory that says now the world's safest manufacturer for energy, Plant Voco. But yet, when you look at what it has done, we did a study on it, and it showed that children who were never met after the one age passed 0 to 1, and how the increase of cancer took care of those children, and how it's still growing. And it's gone very high. It's up now to 79% of children who won't get past 1 year old. And you need to know that, because it's an affection that we want to teach the children as they grow up, which you need to be on guard with. And that's why I want to say to you today, we don't stop doing what we're doing. We keep increasing, doing what we can do to make sure we're being understood. And I work with the Blue Ridge Environmental Defense League, who also look at what things are doing throughout the country in other 5 states. And with all those who are working with me, even now with Reverend Howard, and what we do in the neighborhood where we are now. And what we're trying to do, even with the church at MacArthur Spring Branch Church. I always tell them what I'm going to do and what I'm not going to do, but one thing I'm going to do is make sure I'm being taught by God to tell you what you need to do, that we can be justice in doing and not injustice and not doing what we need to do. Stand up. Tell them you ain't doing what you need to do. And let them know that they are injustice people. And I know sometimes I may say some things to them and they get upset with me. But I want you to know, I'm going to tell you what I think you need to know. And I want to do that, and I'm understanding how we can do it. And by the way, I got to stop myself now because I've been going over my 5 minutes. But because I want you to know how important it is. When I received that information, I used to go down with her, and we'd stand there in the church, and she would do all her things and even have the things where she can fly and look at the plant where we're doing, able to look at. And I didn't even know anything about that, but watching her gave me an idea that this is how you get the things that are problems resolved. And I want to thank you for what you did, because it grew in me. And yet I was older than she is, quite old. I ain't but 78 now, though. But I tell you, I want to thank God for having her to come to us, because I feel it was the leadership through God that sent her to come to where we are, even in this moment in time, because it was motivated to give us the understanding that we can pass down not only today, but to the next generation. And that's my idea. And every time I take a lot of pictures, because I want to send those pictures to somebody else, and I send them to my children, who my daughter went to school over here in the college, and the university next door. But the idea was, and I sent her a note today, I'm back. She said, "Oh, Daddy, you up there?" "Yeah, I'm up here again." Because she knows I'm still with the environmental stuff. And I want to thank you for that. And I want to thank all of you for coming today, and I'm going to be quiet. And y'all have a blessed day, and thank y'all for coming.
I think now we'd like to open it up to any questions from the audience that you might have for any of our panelists. We'd really like to open it up to a discussion. Are there any questions? Oh, yes. They can hear you.
Can you hear me? There was a company that came across the state lines from Georgia and opened a facility maybe a quarter of a mile from the school, because what they wanted to do they could not do in the state of Georgia because of their environmental laws, but they could do in the state of Alabama. Their runoff water ditch ran directly to an artesian well that was the source supply of water for the city of Fruithurst since 1996. The state environmental agency, they would have to report those runoff tests every 6 months. Of the 20 years that they were in operation, they did that maybe 11 times, I think. And of those 11 times, they far exceeded the contamination levels, and the worst thing that happened to them was a certified letter from the State Environmental Office. So the city of Fruithurst, which included the school at that time, used that groundwater as their city municipal water system until 2000, I think, somewhere around in there. Yes. You're welcome.
Thank you all so much for your work. As you all alluded to, the work that you do is the work of years, not days or months. So I'm curious how you think about staying motivated while you're in the trenches day after day, not knowing how it's going to go in the end.
You want to answer that?
Well, one thing I look at as staying in the trenches that when you know your responsibility and what you're here for, and you don't focus on the situation, focus on what the results of it will be. And by focusing on the results of it, you can bypass a lot of those things that's going to sort of hinder you going through the process. So stay focused on what your objective is, and that way you pretty much going to overcome the obstacle that's in your path.
And I would answer to that too. My motivation is the children. I'm still there. I'm still in the community. I don't foresee doing anything any different, but the motivation also comes when you have people like Dr. Ashwood that can help and has connections that we do not have. So you start making those connections and start getting answers, and people want to come in and help. I've never seen our community come together as they did when we were heavily involved in the cancer research. It got a lot of attention, which then got donations, which meant more tests. All of the things. People in our community went to Auburn to be trained. They were motivated. They fed off of it. But the bottom line is the objective is, for me, is the children.
I agree with the children. I agree with the children, because that's the thing that I feel need to be motivated, because they can start growing and keeping what we're trying to do in the future. And it has to be started with them.
Well, and to tag on to that, Loka and I had a small conversation earlier. My children have chosen their profession because of this work.
Yeah.
Yeah, my oldest has graduated law school from Bama, and she is working as an attorney, and my youngest is in pre-med at Auburn, but all because of this. Yeah.
It's because of you.
Can you all explain to the audience how much land Plant Vogel used and was taken from the black families in Shell Bluff?
In Shell Bluff, in the area where Plant Vogel came in, and the land there was a highway running out, Highway 8 and Highway 23. With all the land that within pretty much in that area was owned by black farmers. And during that time when Plant Vogel came down, my granddad had bought some land in the area. And in 1919, he bought the land in 1919. And after he bought it in 1919, he bought some more in 1929. And a total of almost 800 acres. And that portion of land was owned by him, by my granddad, but also a lot of other black farmers in that area. And when Plant Vogel came in the area, they began to start taking the land. And they were not sharecropping, but getting a loan. Back in the days, you have to get a run in order to be able to run the farm the next year. And there come a time when they had to pay the pay when the crop was made. They paid the merchant that they got their product from. And so sometime they was always would break even. They never would gain nothing. They always would break even. And that was the system. Mm-hmm. And when Plant Vogel came into the system, then that really took effect of them. And what happened then the system got involved in the local government and everything. And when you start taking bribes taking bribes and things to undercut the rights of the people, then you're falling down, and that's what took place in the area, because the city was putting people in place that was in the administrative side, and they wasn't concerned about the people's in. They was more concerned about what the big man could get. Approximately 300 plus acres, and the price we got for it was less than the other acres. We got $450 per acre. And another area we got right next to it, tied on the same land, was $5,000 per acre. And that's the difference in our area. $450 to $5,000. And that's about we call racial injustice.
It's a similar situation in Fruithurst. I didn't mention this in the statistics, but my school is 80% poverty. So for the company to come into Fruithurst to do what they needed to do, because they owned a much larger company 10 miles from us in Georgia, but in the rural areas, we're ignored. I mean, it's just passed by, and they were able to do what they wanted to do the chemicals. We had all types of statistics where they had household field lines to run the chemicals out of the plant. They would hose it down. All the things, they would switch to a well at night, and so they didn't show as much municipal water during the day, but they were able to do what they needed to do in a very rural, high-poverty community.
And so in speaking of water, the wells that we always get our water from the wells, and the wells had to be dug deeper because of the water being put off the top of the ground. And all the wells had to start going deeper.
Thank you all for being here. I have a question about, like, I kept hearing y'all phrase it as like when Dr. Ashwood came in. So I'm curious from your perspective how you found out about these things, how you built trust with the community, and from y'all's perspective, what did you think when she came in with this information, and you know how you kind of built that relationship over time?
Well, when I first met her, when I first came back from Vietnam, there was a lot of things going on in my life that when there was a lot of racial things going on. And so in order to be able to bypass that, I had to get to the point that I can be able to see Christ in the process. And so when Loka came through, her spirit was humble. And that humble spirit connected me back to where I was raised up as my mother taught me as a child. How to be humble, you can be powerful yet humble. And when she came along and started talking about injustice and all that, then that's how I got really tied up with it. And I really appreciate that, because there's a lot of things we go through in life that there's no love, no joy, no peace. But when she came along, that opened it up for me to be able to enjoy that peace that I had lost because of hatred had come into my life. And hatred will kill you. And that's why you learn to love and not hate, no matter who they are. And in this world, as I said before, there's only two kinds of people in the world, children of God, children of the devil. So we have to make a choice in our life what direction we want to go. Because one day we're all going to have to give an account of it.
And I would say that she was motivated to me because of what my parents had did, who lived in that same neighborhood in Burke County. And I was so young when I left Burke County, I was still a child. And they left because they couldn't have the property that they were working on as farmers. And they had to move back to the other area. And to tell you how bad it was, I'm working today because they are ignoring what they were able to do when they moved back to Hyde Park. And they created justice in Hyde Park for the things of the people in Hyde Park, which was now what we have there was a community that was racially the white community on one side of the road, black community on that other. And what they did, they worked together. And when it was a company in between who was injustice. And when they worked together and we found out that they were doing something on the white side, they thought the white side wasn't going to come tell us. But they called and had a meeting, told me, said, look, they're over here they're going to pay us to come out because of the contamination. And we learned from that. We got together with the two. And we were united to fight together. And that's the same thing I saw when she came. You have to be united in what you're going to do. And that's what I use that for. Because that is still what I'm working on today, is to make sure that Hyde Park recognized my mother and family for what they did and creating what they did in Hyde Park. So I even work with the mayor today and making sure that Hyde Park is recognized for the injustice that was done when it was a blessing being done by God. And I'm talking with the mayor, I'm talking with the governor, I'm talking with everybody, because there are still homes there that they took from them. And there was a hurricane, Helena came through, and they're taking all the burnt, all the traffic, all the fallen trees that were torn down. They're putting them in Hyde Park as trash and have not even spoken to the people. So that's why I'm working on it so hard as I'm talking to you right now, because they're on my top list to get them cut down. And that's why you have to start with the children. That's what I'm doing.
My connection to Loka, I started trying to get answers in the summer of 2016 through multiple agencies, environmental agencies, different things. But being the principal of an elementary school, this is very bizarre, but we would have a company come in and check all the fire extinguishers, take the ones that needed to be refilled, those type things. And the man who did that had his younger child with him at the time, and she sent me a friend request on Facebook. And so as I was begging for answers and help and all the things with the explosive cases of leukemia, she was in a class that Dr. Ashwood taught. So she sent me a message and said, do you mind if I give her your contact information? I said, absolutely not. I was desperate and begging. And she made that connection. Loka drove 2 hours north of Auburn to our little community. We met, and the process started that January 2017. So, social media, but that's the way it happened.
Yeah, with Christy, it was a class I taught called Community Organization. It was a really fun class, and that student connected us.
Yes.
Abby, right?
Yes.
It was Abby that connected us. So that's how that began. But I was talking to Christy about this. Fruithurst also just has a spark. You go into just a community spark, and it's the same with the folks in Shell Bluff. There's this deep determination and love for that place. Now, Shell Bluff was, the first time I went there, I was with my husband, Jason, a long time ago, and we met Claude's sister when we first came, and she took us around the area. When I was it was my first year of graduate school, I was working on my PhD, and I was connected to her from someone in Illinois that had a child who had actually gotten cancer proximate to nuclear reactors in Juliet, outside of Chicago. So that was how I first got connected to Claude's sister, and just had a visit before I went back, and then started doing steady research on the area, and then quantifying the land lost and the takings in a 5-mile radius around the plant. It's about half of the land is now owned by the state of Georgia or Georgia Power Company, which is a subsidiary of Southern Company. So it's a tremendous amount of land that they've taken. Are we at about time? I also want to be mindful if people want snacks. Everybody's hungry. Any last question, or ready to eat? I see the rural sociologists will tell me how it is. They're like, yeah, we're ready to eat. Well, thank you so much for coming, and thank you for coming here to the University of Kentucky.
All right, thank you.
So honored to have you.
Thank you.